self-esteem, workplace-related topics.
Subscribe.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision.
Voices of Victory.
Leadership.
Voices of Victory.
Workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario D. Leone.
Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast show. I am your host, Mario D. Leone, and today we are going into our episode of Unmasking the Primal Wound of Men and the Decay of Values. So welcome to another show. If you haven't been here before, we talk about all things self-esteem, all things confidence, and of course, all things psychology. So today, we're going to peel back the curtain on a hidden truth that many men carry. A truth that shapes their actions, defines their very priorities, and, for some, derails their journey toward any real success. We're diving into the deep waters of the primal wound and its ripple effect on the values that men hold and the goals that they actually strive for. So let's get real. Let's talk about the primal wound that men experience. Not in abstract terms, but in ways that show up in their everyday lives. At its core, this wound often begins with a break in their empathy. Somewhere along the line, maybe as boys, these men experience moments where they felt unseen, unheard, or simply feeling not enough. Maybe it came from the father who was emotionally absent, or a mother who never validated their unique strengths, or a society that told them they had to man up before they even knew what it actually meant to be a man. And this is where it starts. A tear, a strong tear into their sense of self-worth. A voice in their head that whispers that they're unworthy unless they prove themselves. This wound, it festers. It's deepened by moments of failure, rejection, or isolation. And because this pain is too much to bear, many men turn outward, searching for distractions to fill that very void. What are those major distractions? Well, if we look around, we see all of them. Men are consumed by the grind, the hustle, the external chase of objects, the external validation chase. But what are they chasing, really? Money? Well, wealth becomes the ultimate marker of success. It's not about security or freedom. It's about proving themselves in the world. But here's the trap. No amount of money will ever be enough to patch the hole left by a primal wound or just feeling secure without the money. Interesting enough, money comes and goes. Of course, you can find ways to put it in your bank account and continue with it, but you can't be solely depend on it. If your self-worth is dependent on money, then when the money is gone, and so is your self-worth. You'll just have to get more in order to fill that hole. That's what I'm basically trying to say. Or is it status, the title, the car, the watch, all of the symbols of having made it? Yet, these symbols are hollow. They mask a deeper insecurity. What about addictions? Alcohol, drugs, gambling, overworking, the desperate attempts to just escape the vulnerability that they refuse to actually face. The relationships, moving from partner to partner, seeking validation. Now, the ultimate feeling of more. I need more of this, more of that. I need more of this, more of that. We start chasing all of this excess. Others cling too tightly, fearing abandonment, and they lose themselves in their own relationships, or maybe lose themselves in the process. Perhaps it's a risk of vulnerability and they feel uncomfortable about it. What about another major distraction, entertainment and technology? Hours lost to screens, scrolling, gaming, binge watching, numbing the pain. But what it does is really rob men of their time and, of course, their purpose. Of course, you can entertain yourself, but at what point does it become overindulgent? At what point does it own you versus you owning it? Interesting, isn't it? At what point do we experience healthy escapism versus unhealthy escapism? If you do escape into a hobby, how can you channel it back into something of higher value so that it impacts your life for the better? Because these distractions, they're not inherently bad by themselves, but they become dangerous when they replace true values. They become a counterfeit currency for self-worth. When you feel that you can find your self-worth in all of those distractions, then you have lost your way. Now, when it comes to healing, and this is literally challenges for men, we'll say roughly around 25 to 40, if we take a good hard look at certain issues, we're going to see that these issues, they stem from unhealed wounds. They're rooted in childhood, maybe even in societal pressures growing up. It creates patterns of pain, avoidance, and of course, self-sabotage. So I'm going to take a moment and discuss a lot of these patterns that are unhealed and, of course, problematic. And remember, it's not just an external behavior. That's the thing. A lot of psychologists will just look at the externals. Hey, these are just outpictured behaviors. But guess what? There's a connection to the root cause. This is called the unconscious aspects, the deeper part. For example, the lack of direction and purpose. What's the problem? Well, many men feel lost or aimless or stuck in careers or lifestyles that they don't truly value. They may even question their purpose but feel paralyzed by fear or societal expectations or the pressure to have it all figured out. Now, the healing idea behind this is learning to develop a vision that's aligned with your personal values that guide you in a direction. They become directional. Why it works is purpose doesn't come from external validation. It literally comes from within. You begin by identifying what genuinely matters to you. How do we do that? Journaling, therapy, coaching, reflecting, contemplation, clarifying your core values, and of course, daily actions with all of those things. As you take small intentional steps towards what feels meaningful, the confidence and clarity, it will follow and eventually bubble to the surface. Now, when it comes down to it, emotional expression can be a major struggle as well. The problem, men feel that they can't express vulnerability due to what society thinks, due to societal expectations of stoicism, for example. And this leads to bottling up emotions, which eventually manifests as anger, stress, physical health issues. What's the healing concept behind this? Well, we learn emotional literacy. Why it actually functions is emotions are just signals. They're not weakness. They start small. We identify them. We name what we're feeling, and we actually get to share them with people that are trusted, or perhaps a therapist. Why not dismantle them? Or if we have false beliefs, dismantle those too. And you know what? That vulnerability is really powerful. But what we need to dismantle is the false belief that vulnerability equals some kind of weakness. And that's what happens. People perceive vulnerability as a weakness. But over time, emotional expression builds deeper connections and reduces that inner tension that they're experiencing. Now, another one is literally dependence on external validation. The problem is whether it's through career success, physical appearance, or relationships, many men, they derive their self-worth from external achievements or approval. When validation isn't forthcoming, they're not getting enough of it, self-doubt and despair, well, they start to take over. What do we do? How do we heal from this? Well, we start to cultivate intrinsic self-worth. Intrinsic has the word in because it is within you. Self-worth cannot be found externally, period. Now, why does this concept even function? Well, we have to separate from what we achieve from the inherent value that we actually have for ourselves. Practicing that self-compassion and celebrate our progress, not the perfection. Engaging in activities that actually bring us joy, not just admiration for the sake of appearances. And this creates a foundation of self-respect that isn't shaken by others' opinions. That's the fun part. Healthy relationships are also a major problem. Many men struggle. They struggle with the intimacy, either by avoiding the closeness or becoming overly dependent. Maybe they have unresolved wounds and triggers that they take out on their partner, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, and it shapes how they relate to their partner. How do they heal from this? Well, work on attachment wounds. Why does it actually function? Well, understanding your attachment style helps you recognize those patterns, and therapy or relationship coaching could also help. Some people are just flat out too proud for it, but communication exercises, learning how to communicate better. If your partner is having a meltdown and you're having a meltdown with them, then you're not being grounded. There's not a sense of being groundedness there. There is a great deal of confidence and power in being grounded. So guess what? When you learn to become a better communicator and understanding that conflict is just an opportunity, it's an opportunity to find and work out something so this way you can get through it. It's not easy. No one ever said it was, but your relationships are much like a mirror that they reflect parts of you, maybe even some of your triggers. And when it comes to the addictions and escapism, this is also a bigger problem, right? Gaming, compulsive drinking, all kinds of addictions to literally actually escape unresolved pain. So these habits, they numb discomfort, and of course they make you escape. But you know what? You're just going to lose your entire day. You're going to have a feeling of emptiness afterwards and maybe some dissatisfaction, like, where did my day go? So the healing concept behind that is address the underlying wound that is actually driving the behavior. And that's the thing. Addictions are more of symptoms, not the root problem. I've heard many people that I've spoken to in Alcoholic Anonymous circles where they actually have stated to me many times is that alcohol is more of a symptom. And it's a symptom that comes from the root cause of actually not loving yourself. And I've heard that through many circles like that. And you know what? I believe there's a lot of truth to that. So why not step into a place where we remove the need for destructive coping mechanisms, combine some therapy with some healthier outlets, and understanding the difference between healthy escapism, where it would maybe promote a hobby such as playing an instrument or learning a language, versus the unhealthy escapism, which can lead us down all kinds of addictions. And then there's the financial stress, right? The men equate themselves, maybe even equate their self-worth connected to the financial success. And then when the financial success disappears, they're suddenly depressed and say, oh, I wish I could go back to the way I was making money 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago is gone, pal. So if you feel shame, fear, or failure about that, it's just going to lead to, future burnout, paralysis, maybe even just depression of constantly wanting to go back to that time that you can't go back to. How do you heal from that? Well, you got to redefine what success actually means. Focus on financial literacy a little bit more. Understand that success is not a number. It's a lifestyle. It's aligned with your values, and it's having that freedom. I get it. But having a realistic concept of financial education on your budgeting, your saving, and of course, you're investing. There's loneliness and isolation. That's a big one too. There's a problem, right? A lack of deep friendships, totally isolating themselves. They feel ashamed to admit loneliness. They don't understand the concept between being lonely and alone, where if you're alone, you're developing yourself, working on yourself, or if you're lonely, you have that egotistical cling, like you have to be around someone. I must be in a relationship. I have to be with somebody. I should be. Anytime you throw I in front of it, it becomes really bad. So here's the thing. I understand that humans are indeed wired for connection, but we should really understand when we connect with people, it should also align to our interests, align to our values, such as maybe fitness or volunteering or particular hobbies or workouts. Practice that vulnerability by opening up to people. Some people are either completely closed off or they're too open. They don't have a gate that they can regulate. That's what boundaries is all about. Boundaries are they're not always verbal, they're action driven. And with consistent efforts, guess what? You can create a support system that combats loneliness. And then, of course, we got the fear of failure. Good old fear of failure, right? Why try? Why bother? I'm only going to fail anyway, right? They're stuck in their comfort zone, rationalizing inaction, right? Feeling that resentment and that regret just quietly build, looking at the past as to when they failed in the past. And how do they heal? Well, we have to take a look and start reframing the failure as actual growth. People don't understand the difference between maladaptive perfectionism and perfectionism. There is a distinguished difference. Practice taking small risks to build resilience, calculated ones, albeit. Over time, you'll see setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow, not threats to your worth. Growth is not a threat, and you should keep that in mind. What about burnout? Good old burnout, right? Here's the problem. Overwork just to prove themselves or escape their problems. Let me just be busy so I don't have to think about other things. This leads to just exhaustion, being numb, and loss of satisfaction on any level. What do we do? Well, self-care equals self-discipline, and we should prioritize some of that in our life. Why does this actually function? Well, creating boundaries around work and dedicating time towards meaningful connections and hobbies, prioritizing our sleep so we could operate at 100% instead of 50%, and of course exercising maybe in the evening so we make ourselves tired so we go to sleep really sleeping with a nice sound sleep, and of course we're relaxed, and that self-care helps us replenish our energy and it prevents burnout. So that's what that's all about. So healing doesn't happen overnight. It starts with the small intentional steps. And the challenges you face, they're not insurmountable. They're invitations to grow into a stronger you and the more fulfilled version of yourself. So how does values actually play into all of this? Well, we've discussed some of the difficult sides of escapism. The decay of values, we're going to go over that. If we take a look, what happens is the distractions have taken the wheel. And when that happens, our values values decay or we don't have any. And the deep intrinsic, remember intrinsic is it's inside you, the intrinsic principles that are inside you should guide your life, should act as a GPS, a directional. Honor, integrity, courage, purpose. These things get eroded when it comes to all of the above escapisms that we've discussed. Instead of building a life based on who they are, men focus on what they have and what they can show. And the goals that they once dreamed of achieving, they morph into these shallow ambitions dictated by the expectations of the outside world. So a man might say, I want to be successful, but if you dig deeper, he might be chasing success down to quiet the voice of unworthiness inside of his head. And another might strive for a happy family, but if he hasn't healed his own little wounds inside, his relationships might suffer. If he hasn't worked on his communications, his relationships might suffer. And it might suffer under the weight of his unmet needs and the wounds that he has inside. So what do we do? What do we do as men in 2025? It's time to reclaim true values and goals. That's the truth. Until you confront your primal wounds, you'll always be a step away from the life that you want. Healing isn't about rejecting ambition or walking away from success. It's about redefining success, but on your own terms. It's about stripping away the distractions and rediscovering the values that matter most. So ask yourself these 3 questions seriously. What kind of man do you want to be? What kind of man do you want to show up as? What legacy do you actually want to leave behind? What kind of difference do you want to make in your life and the lives of others? What values truly define your life? Not the ones that you've been told to adopt by other people. Because contrary to popular belief, every single belief that you have didn't come from within you. It came from outside of you. And that is a fact, not a platitude. So healing that primal wound is going to be hard. It's going to demand that you face your feelings, you face the stuff you've been running away from. Understand that vulnerability is important. We have to overcome that powerlessness that we've trained ourselves to be. But here's the victory. Once you confront those feelings, they lose their very grip. You reclaim your freedom, you reclaim your dignity, and of course your power. And it's time to stop letting the world distract you from the man that you've meant to be. And you know what? It's time to dig deep, heal the wound, rise stronger than you ever have before. Until next time, just remember, true victory starts within. It's your inner world that would be strengthened to create a better outside world because you are enough. And I will see you on the next episode.